Sometimes you start something and you don't really understand, why you're doing it. It just comes to you. And then I just realized that it's 2025. And in 2005, Pride and Prejudice came out with Keira Knightley. And in 1995 was when Sense and Sensibility came out. And also, when did the Pride and Prejudice BBC series? Hold on. I forgot. And Prejudice. British television 1995. And Sense and Sensibility was also in 1995. The first one. And it's like the 20 and 30? No way. It is the 30 and 20. I'm going to be 40. Okay. I was born in 85. It's all happening. We just don't even know. And I did just read this article, a BBC article, that said why you should read this out loud. And it's talking about the benefits of reading out loud. And reading, what did it say up here? It said to read literally meant to cry out or to listen. Like, I am sending you a very urgent message, says one letter from this period. Listen to this tablet. If it's appropriate, have the king listen to it. You didn't see the tablet, you read it out loud. Like, listen to this tablet that I'm writing you. It's beneficial throughout the age range. So, the production effect. It means that producing written words to say reading them out loud improves our memory of them. In another study, adults aged 67 to 88 were given the same task, reading words either silently or aloud before then writing down all they could remember. They were able to recall 27% of the words they read aloud, but only 10% of what they read silently. So it's good for you to read out loud, and it's probably good for you to listen to somebody read too, but it's good for you to read out loud, and it's also good because this is like the 20th anniversary of all these movies, and 30th anniversary of movies that are by Jane Austen. And it's all just happening, and I didn't even mean for any of that time. I didn't even realize it was 2025. I'm just going through it, and I was just like, I need to read. I'm going through hard times, and I just need to read. Who does that? Okay. Let's read chapter 4. They're going off. They're actually going somewhere. They've been denying. Eleanor and Marianne have just been like, no, we can't go with you anywhere. We can't go anywhere with anybody, anywhere. Because of Mrs. Dashwood, I guess. They didn't want to leave their mother alone, but they finally agreed to go with Mrs. Jennings to London. And they may or may not see Willoughby, and they may or may not see Edward Ferrars, and they may or may not talk to John Dashwood, who is their half-brother. Right. Yeah. Okay, chapter 4, volume 2. Eleanor could not find herself in the carriage with Mrs. Jennings, and beginning a journey to London under her protection and as her guest, without wondering at her own situation. So short had their acquaintance with that lady been, so wholly unsuited were they in age and disposition, and so many had been her objections against such a measure only a few days before. But these objections had all, with that happy ardour of youth which Marianne and her mother equally shared, been overcome or overlooked, and Eleanor, in spite of every occasional doubt of Willoughby's constancy, could not witness the rapture of delightful expectation which filled the whole soul and beamed in the eyes of Marianne, without feeling how blank was her own prospect, how cheerless her own state of mind in the comparison, and how gladly she would engage in the solicitude of Marianne's situation to have the same animating object in view, the same possibility of hope. A very short time, however, must now decide what Willoughby's intentions were. In all probability, he was already in town. Marianne's eagerness to be gone declared her dependence on finding him there, and Eleanor's resolve not only upon gaining every new light as to his character, which her own observation or the intelligence of others could give her, but likewise upon watching his behaviour to her sister with such zealous attention as to ascertain what he was and what he meant before many meetings had taken place. Should the result of her observations be unfavourable, she was determined to all events to open the eyes of her sister. Should it be otherwise, her exertions would be of a different nature. She must learn to avoid every selfish comparison and banish every regret, which might lessen her satisfaction and the happiness of Marianne. They were 3 days on their journey, and Marianne's behaviour as they travelled was a happy specimen of what her future complacence, and companionableness. That's such a long-looking word. It's a very long word. To Mrs. Jennings might be expected to be. She sat in silence almost all the way, wrapped in her own meditations. Oh, the Meditations of Eleanor Dashwood. That would be a cute book. And scarcely ever voluntarily speaking, except when an object of picturesque beauty within their view drew from her an exclamation of delightful, exclusively addressed to her sister. To atone for this conduct, therefore, Eleanor took immediate possession of the post of civility which she had assigned herself, behaved with the greatest attention to Mrs. Jennings, talked with her, laughed with her, and listened to her whenever she could, and Mrs. Jennings on her side treated them both with all possible kindness, was solicitous on every occasion for their ease and enjoyment, and only disturbed that she could not make them choose their own dinners at the inn, nor exhort a confession of the preferring salmon to cod or boiled fowls to veal cutlets. They reached town by 3 o'clock the 3rd day, glad to be released, after such a journey, from a confinement of a carriage, and ready to enjoy all the luxuries of a good fire. The house was handsome and handsomely fitted up, and the young ladies were immediately put in possession of a very comfortable apartment. It had formerly been Charlotte's, and over the mantelpiece still hung a landscape and coloured skills of her performance, in proof of her having spent 7 years at a great school in town to some effect. As dinner was not to be ready in less than 2 hours from their arrival, Eleanor determined to employ the interval in writing to her mother, and sat down for that purpose. In a few moments Marianne did the same. "I am writing home, Marianne," said Eleanor. "Had not you better defer your letter for a day or two?" "I am not going to write to mother," replied Marianne, hastily, as if wishing to avoid any farther inquiry. Eleanor said no more. It immediately struck her that she must then be writing to Willoughby. And the conclusion which is as instantly followed was that, however mysteriously they might wish to conduct their affair, they must be engaged. We still don't know if they're actually engaged. That's really crazy. This conviction, though not entirely satisfactory, gave her pleasure, and she continued her letter with great alacrity. Marianne's was finished in a very few moments. In length it could be no more than a note. It was then folded up, sealed, and directed with eager rapidity. Eleanor thought she could distinguish a large W in the direction. There's a little 1. Let's see what that means. Why would there be a 1 there? Direction, the address. Oh, in the direction. And no sooner was it completed than Marianne, ringing the bell, requested a footman who answered it to get that letter for her to the 2-penny post. The 2-penny post. In 1801, the London penny post was doubled in price. Whoa. Austen must, therefore, have added this revision after the earlier draft of the novel, as she did the reference to Scott. The London post dated from the late 17th century. Letters were picked up and delivered 4 to 8 times daily. Busy, busy mailman. Mail people. What? Oh. Direction and post. Yes. They decided this decided the matter at once. Her spirits still continued very high, but there was a flutter in them which prevented their giving much pleasure to her sister, and this agitation increased as the evening drew on. She could scarcely eat any dinner, and when they afterwards returned to the drawing-room, seemed anxiously listening to the sound of every carriage. Oh my God, it's too much. It's too much. It was a great satisfaction to Eleanor that Mrs. Jennings, by being so much engaged in her own room, could see little of what was passing. The tea things were brought in, And already had Marianne been disappointed more than once by a rap at the neighbouring door, when a loud one was suddenly heard which could not be mistaken for any other house. Oh my god, oh my god. Eleanor felt secure of this announcing Willoughby's approach, and Marianne moved towards the door. I'm so excited that I can't even read. Okay. Eleanor felt secure of its announcing Willoughby's approach, and Marianne, starting up, moved towards the door. Everything was silent. This could not be borne many seconds. She opened the door, advanced a few steps toward the stairs, and after listening half a minute, returned into the room in all the agitation which a conviction of having heard him would naturally produce, in the ecstasy of her feelings. At that instant she could not help exclaiming, "Oh, Eleanor, it is Willoughby, indeed it is!" and seemed almost ready to throw herself into his arms when Colonel Brandon appeared. Whap, whap. Colonel Brandon. It was too great a shock to be borne with calmness, and she immediately left the room. Eleanor was disappointed too, but at the same time her regard for Colonel Brandon ensured his welcome with her, and she felt particularly hurt that a man so partial to his sister should perceive that she experienced nothing but grief and disappointment in seeing him. Oh God. She instantly saw that it was not unnoticed by him, and that he even observed Marianne as she quitted the room with such astonishment and concern as hardly left him the recollection of what civility demanded towards herself. "Is your sister ill?" said he. Eleanor answered in some distress that she was, and then talked of headaches and low spirits and over-fatigues, and of everything to which she could decently attribute her sister's behaviour. He heard her with the utmost earnest attention, but seeming to recollect himself, said no more on the subject, and began directly to speak of his pleasure at seeing them in London, making the usual inquiries about their journey and the friends and the blah, 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 and they had left behind. The friends they had left behind. In this calm kind of way, with very little interest on either side, they continued to talk, both of them out of spirits, and the thoughts of both engaged elsewhere. Eleanor wished very much to ask whether Willoughby were then in town, but she was afraid of giving him pain by an inquiry after his rival. And at length, by way of saying something, she asked him if he had been in London ever since she had seen them last. "Yes," he replied with some embarrassment, "almost ever since. I have been once or twice at Delaford for a few days, but it has never been in my power to return to Barton." "What, he left in such a hurry? Tell me why." This and the manner in which it was said immediately brought back to her remembrance all the circumstances of his quitting that place, with the uneasiness and suspicion they had caused Mrs. Jennings, and she was fearful that her question had implied much more curiosity on the subject than she literally ever felt. Mrs. Jennings soon came in. "Oh, Colonel," said she, with her usual noisy cheerfulness, "I am monstrous glad to see you. Sorry I could not come before, beg your pardon, but I have been forced to look about me a little and settle my matters, for it is a long while since I have been at home, and you know one has always a world of little odd things to do after one has been away for any time. And then I have that Cartwright to settle with. Lord, I have been busy as a bee ever since dinner. But pray, Colonel, how came you to conjure how came you to conjure out that I should be in town today? Conjure. How came you to conjure that I should be in town today? I had the pleasure of hearing it at Mr. Palmer's, where I've been dining." "Oh, you did? Well, how do they all know? No. How do they all do at their house? How does Charlotte do? I warrant you she is as fine size by this time." "Mrs. Palmer appears quite well, and I am commissioned to tell you that you will certainly see her tomorrow." "Aye, to be sure, I thought as much. Well, Colonel, I've brought 2 young ladies with me, you see. That is, you see but one of them now, but there is another one somewhere. Your friend, Miss Marianne, too, which you will not be sorry to hear. I do not know what you and Mr. Willoughby will do between you about her. Aye, that is a fine thing to be young and handsome. Well, I was young once, but I never was very handsome, worse luck for me. However, I got a very good husband, and I don't know what the greatest beauty can do more. Ah, poor man. He has been dead these 8 years and better. But, Colonel, where have you been since we parted? And how does your business go on? Come, come, let's have no secrets among friends. I love Mrs. Jennings. She said, shut up and sit down and tell me every single thing. I asked you about 12 questions and you have to answer all of them. He replied with his customary mildness to all her inquiries, but without satisfying her in any. Eleanor now began to make the tea, and Marianne was obliged to appear again. After her entrance, Colonel Brandon became more thoughtful and silent than he had been before, and Mrs. Jennings could not prevail on him to stay long. No other visitor appeared that evening, and the ladies were unanimous in agreeing to go to bed early. Likely that Marianne's going to go to sleep. Jeez. Marianne rose the next morning with recovered spirits and happy looks. The disappointment of the evening before seemed forgotten in the expectation of what was to happen that day. They had not long finished their breakfast before Mrs. Palmer's barouche stopped at the door. Carriage, we know that. And in a few minutes she came laughing into the room, so delighted to see them all that it was hard to say whether she received most pleasure from meeting her mother or the Miss Dashwoods again. So surprised at their coming to town, though it was what she had rather expected all along. So angry at their accepting her mother's invitation after declining her own, though at the same time she would never have forgotten them if they had not come. Oh, yeah. This is an invitation. They just kept... Okay. Mr. Palmer will be so happy to see you, said she. What do you think he said when he heard of your coming with Mamma? I forget what it was now, but it was something so droll. Yes, I can't wait to get Mr. Palmer and Mrs. Jennings in the same room again. So fun, and Mrs. Palmer's fun too. After an hour or two spent in what her mother called comfortable chat, or in other words, in every variety of inquiry concerning all their acquaintance on Mrs. Jennings' side, and in laughter without cause on Mrs. Palmer's, it was proposed by the latter that they should all accompany her to some shops where they had business that morning, to which Mrs. Jennings and Eleanor readily consented, as having likewise some purchases to make themselves, and Marianne, though declining it at first, was induced to go likewise. She's going to stay at home and wait for Willoughby the whole time? No. Wherever they went, she was evidently always on the watch. In Bond Street especially, James Bond Street, where much of their business lay, her eyes were in constant inquiry. And in whatever shop the party were engaged, her mind was equally abstracted from everything actually before them, from all that interested and occupied others. Restless and dissatisfied everywhere, her sister could never obtain her opinion of any article of purchase, however it might equally concern them both. She received no pleasure from anything, was only impatient to be at home again, and could with difficulty govern her vexation at the tediousness of Mrs. Palmer, whose eye was caught by everything, pretty, expensive, or new, who was wild to buy all, could determine on none, and dawdled away her time in rapture and indecision. Just somebody who loves to shop for the sake of shopping. They take that indecision and they go, this is fun. Should I get this blouse or should I get that blouse? What do you think? Well, this one's really pink, and I mean, they could just go on and on. These people who love to shop for the sake of shopping. It was late in the morning before they returned home, and no sooner had they entered the house than Marianne flew eagerly up the stairs, and when Eleanor followed, she found her turning from the table with a sorrowful countenance, which declared that no Willoughby had been there. He's just sitting there waiting for them. Has no letter been left here for me since we went out? Said she to the footman, who then entered with the parcels. She was answered in the negative. Are you quite sure of it? She replied. Oh, boy. Are you certain that no servant, no porter has left any letter or note? The man replied that none had. How very odd, said she in a low and disappointed voice as she turned away from the window. How odd indeed, repeated Eleanor within herself, regarding her sister with uneasiness. If she had not known him to be in town, she would have not written to him as she did. She would not have written to Calm Magna. And if he's in town, how odd that he should neither come nor write. Oh, my dear mother, you must be wrong in permitting an engagement between a daughter so young as a man so little known to be carried on in so doubtful, so mysterious a manner. I long to inquire, but how will my interference be borne? She determined after some consideration that if appearances continued many days longer, as unpleasant as they were now, she would represent the strongest manner to her mother the necessity of some serious inquiry into the affair. Mrs. Palmer and two elderly ladies of Mrs. Jennings' intimate acquaintance, whom she had met and invited in the morning, dined with them. The former left them soon after tea to fulfill her evening engagements, and Eleanor was obliged to assist in making a whist table for the others. Whist, I remember, is a card game, another card game that I couldn't tell you how to play. Maybe there's fish involved? I don't remember. Marianne was of no use on these occasions, as she would never learn the game, but though her time was therefore at her disposal, the evening was by no means more protected of pleasure than to Eleanor, for it was spent in all the anxiety of expectation and the pain of disappointment. So many emotions to be had by Eleanor, huh? Wow, that's wild. Gray hair just loves to go anywhere. She sometimes endeavoured for a few minutes to read, but the book was soon thrown aside, and she returned to the more interesting employment of walking backwards and forwards across the room, pausing for a moment whenever she came to the window in hopes of distinguishing the long-expected rap. Oh, boy. It's so good. I just want to read one more. No, it's absolutely too long. It's out of the question. My goodness. The anticipation, huh? It's all too much. The anticipation is much too much sometimes. And it's just terrible. All right. That was chapter 4. We're plugging along. Poor Marianne. I truly don't remember what happens, and we'll have to find out together. Next time, we'll be reading chapter 5 of Sense and Sensibility with me, your narrator, Emily. Happy reading and ta-ta!